Welcome to the show. We're starting out with a couple of messages from some of my sponsors. So please give them your attention because they have some very important information that I think that you don't want to miss. And then I'll be back.
Majority of people going through a separation or divorce, it is a very stressful time in their lives. There are so many emotions about everything, so many things to deal with, and it can be a time of overwhelm. And you might be finding yourself in survival mode or even procrastinating on moving forward. I know how you feel. I was there. I am Francesca Ray, a certified financial planner for 20 years. 4 years ago, I thought I had it all until it came crashing down. My marriage had ended. My experience of going through a separation and divorce was challenging. I know how you feel. My free masterclass, Money Love Affair, How My Husband's Affair Became My Financial Awakening, will be on Tuesday, April 23rd at 12 Eastern Standard Time. I hope you will join me as I will share with you my personal experience that turned my heartbreak into a roadmap for reclaiming my power, transforming beliefs around money, and unlock the door to a life filled with financial freedom and self love. It was a painful chapter in my life, but it also became the catalyst for change. I am so grateful I went through this experience, and I want to share with you how you can get through this, persevere, be resilient, and come out with a deeper desire to create a better life and future for yourself. I did for myself and my children, and I want to share that with you. You will learn in my masterclass how to understand your money stories and how it's crucial that intuition is your financial superpower. I'm going to break down barriers and have women overcome financial challenges, demystify money, and that it's more than just dollars and cents, and help you make decisions by focusing on three key elements to money intelligence. Again, join me in my free masterclass, Money Love Affair, How My Husband's Affair Became My Financial Awakening, on Tuesday, April 23rd at 12 Eastern Standard Time. This will not be your typical financial planning seminar. I will share the secrets of how you can break free from repeating old money stories and make empowered decisions.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Warren Camp, and I'm the president of the board of directors of the Next Chapter Society. For 25 years, we have empowered families across Alberta to navigate the challenges of divorce and separation. Our vision is a world where individuals transform positively. Our mission focuses on delivering impactful programs, engaging in community partners, and providing essential resources. With 50% of relationships ending in divorce and 1 in 5 children experiencing a broken home, there has never been a greater urgency for comprehensive support services, especially in this current post-pandemic climate. Our programs uniquely combine trauma-informed care, peer support, interactive learning, and we empower participants to process their grief, to enhance communication skills, and to effectively support their children through the challenges of family restructuring. It is a crucial initiative. We offer vital resources, and we are intending to promote happier families during these times of significant change. The importance of your donations cannot be overstated. It will enable us to continue to provide our programs to remove financial barriers, and especially for those who are transitioning from double income to single income or no income homes. Those are the greatest risks to poverty. Our program's commitment to mental health, family stability, and community support fosters resilient communities and bolsters mental well-being across the broader spectrum. Ladies and gentlemen, if you believe in our work, please visit us at nextchapteralberta.ca and make your gift today. Allow us to continue to support Albertan children and families.
Okay, this might sound crazy, but my guest today is going to tell us how to have a good divorce. a good divorce. And she gets challenged on that a lot. She has written a book, The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce. Sarah Armstrong is my guest today. Now, this lady never envisioned herself being divorced, let alone being an author. And what she shares here is titled as a mom's guide. But I want to say that I think there are some really great resources here as well for dads or for families to use who are supporting people going through a divorce, because there's really quick, easy to access information of different steps, different challenges, different things that you're going to face that you may not have expected. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I wonder what Sarah would have said about that. Because that's why she wrote the book. She had people coming to her saying, I admire how you've done this. Even her daughter recognized that her parents were going through a good divorce. That's actually what brought this to her attention, that the way they were doing it could be called that, because obviously it's not going to be perfectly smooth, but she does offer some amazing tips. So she's put those together, very quick, easy to reference from the table of contents, and they're clear and they're actionable. So I am excited for you to meet her and really encourage you to get a copy of her book as well. Hi, I'm Dina Court. I am the author, and I'm an author and a blogger, and I have written some books myself, as well as I now publish Divorce Magazine Canada and Life Changes Magazine. Now, the new editions just came out as digital quarterly editions. The spring ones came out March 1st. We have brand new ones coming in June and again in September and December. Now, between all of those months when there are new magazines, there is a monthly newsletter as well. I can't even begin to explain. I've tried all of the variety that is available, all of the resources, all of the information. You don't have to do this alone. You really are not stuck trying to figure out all the answers. You don't have to be embarrassed to ask. Reach out to us, and I'm sure we'll have an expert we can connect you with. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to connect you. Yes, I've been through a divorce. Yes, I've experienced abuse. Yes, I have been a parent and step parent now, which is amazing. I've been through some of that, but I'm here to connect you with the experts that can help you and find the answers, because I didn't know that a lot of these things and these services and this information was available. I didn't ask. And that's why I really want to encourage you to listen, to ask, to find out. I also want to tell you about some amazing uh, products, some new products that I've heard about that I think are phenomenal. So there is Legal Shield and ID Shield. Now, these are super amazing subscription legal services and identity security services. For about $1 a day, you can subscribe month by month if you want to try this out, and you can access by using your phone and an app. You can book credible legal advice and assistance. You can have your identity protected and recovered if you ever have an incident. There is a lot of benefit to this, so be sure and check out all the links in the show notes for all of the things I've talked about, including a link to Sarah's book. Now, let's jump into our conversation, and you will get to hear firsthand from Sarah herself how this book came about and how she suggests that you can also have a good divorce. This is such a pleasure for me. I have your book, and for anybody who's watching the video, make sure you get a copy of The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce by Sarah Armstrong. This resource, we want to hear how this happened. What got you to this point? Now, you do explain that in the book, but for many who haven't read it yet, who is Sarah Armstrong and why this book? So welcome.
Well, thank you, Dina. So great to be with you. So, first of all, interestingly enough, I'm a mom. You know, I have a daughter, but I work in the global marketing and in the corporate world, and I never planned to write a book. That was not on my bucket list of life things to do. And before I even go into the book, I just want to say, just for the record, I'm not an advocate for divorce. I like to start that way just to show that, because, in an ideal world, couples that get married stay happily married for the long term. That is the goal. And unfortunately, these days, it's more common than ever that that might not be the case. And so I like to start there because I think it's important to set that, and no one gets married to get divorced, right? When no one gets divorced for positive reasons, but when children are involved, um, you know, they don't get to decide that their parents are going to get divorced, and they're the most significantly impacted. So to back up, I got divorced when my daughter was 7, and she's now 21, so that was 14 years ago. And I had watched my parents have been married for 55 years. Amazing, amazing partnership. But I'd watched some very ugly divorces growing up with some of their friend group. And so in my head, when it looked like I was going to go down this path with my soon-to-be ex-husband, I knew I didn't want to do it that way. I had seen the impact on my family friends and their children. And I just said, I don't want to do it that way. So as we went through it, there was just a very conscious approach that we decided to take, with keeping grace very much at the center of all the decisions that we were making. And so we went through a divorce. And then over the course of about the 5 years after our divorce, I had a number of friends who had come to the realization or decision that they were going to go down this path. And they would come to me and they would say, Sarah, would you help me think through this because of how you approached your divorce? And I said, well, I'd be happy to if you've decided to get divorced, because I don't want to convince someone, but I'm happy to think through it with you. So through these conversations over those years, at the end of each of these conversations, my friends would say, you really need to write this stuff down. And, I said, oh yeah. And they said, you should really write a book. And I thought, oh yeah, I'd say, oh yeah, maybe someday, but I didn't plan to do that. And I was at a business dinner in Mexico City with a group of colleagues, and a good friend and colleague turned to me and he said, Sarah, you're so happy. And I said, yeah, I'm very happy. He said, but you're divorced. And I looked at him and I said, Selman, getting a divorce is not a death sentence. I said, my ex-husband and I decided to no longer be married to each other, but I'm happy. Grace is happy. My ex-husband's happy. We're all happy. And yes, we have gone through this divorce process. And I explained to him that, a number of my friends had been encouraging me to write a book. And he said, you really should do that. So the next morning I was flying out of Mexico City and I opened up my personal laptop. And the first line that I wrote was, this book has been written by a girl who never ever thought she would get a divorce, who got a divorce, and what she learned along the way. And I wrote about, I'd say 90% of it on Delta, because I was in a global role. And so I joke that, when everyone else, I'd finished my work on these long international flights I would do, and I would look around and everyone was either watching a movie or reading a book, and I was writing my book. And somehow I think very clearly at 30,000 feet. So I wrote it over the course of about a year and a half-ish. And I got to the point where I was flying out to California for a trip, and I had gotten really busy at work and hadn't touched it for about 9 months. And I opened this file on my laptop and I looked at it. I said, are you just going to be a file on my laptop, or am I going to do something with you? And so I gave myself the goal of finishing it. And then I ended up finishing the manuscript. And then I went through the publishing process, actually self-published. And so I set up a publishing company and I self-published a book. So, it's one of those journeys that I never intended, in fairness, to go on. But the really interesting thing, Dina, is that my daughter was the one that coined the term a good divorce. She's the one that shared that with me. And that was one of the most poignant moments in our early stage of our divorce journey. I mentioned she was 7, but about a year after our divorce, we're standing at a CVS, checking out at the counter, and there's a People magazine on the newsstand there. And there's a celebrity couple who's getting a divorce. And she looks at me, she goes, Mommy, is that a good divorce or a bad divorce? And I kind of stopped. I said, well, Grace, I don't know. What's the difference between a good divorce and a bad divorce? She goes, well, a good divorce is when the mommy and daddy are nice to each other, like you and daddy. And a bad divorce is when they scream and yell at each other. Ooh. And I stopped and I said, well, it's hard to tell from the magazine cover, what type of divorce that is. But when I walked out of that CVS that day, Dina, I thought, whatever my ex-husband and I were doing at this point, that our daughter at age 8 could coin our divorce a good divorce. I felt like we were on something. We were on a path. And I wanted to continue that path, over the course of time. And so, the book itself is meant to help couples and specifically moms really think about the decisions you have to make about your children, the discussions you need to have about those decisions, and really, again, at every turn, put them front and center. And I just don't think there's enough conversation in society about the concept of having a good divorce. And so I really want to help change that perception and allow people to know a good divorce is an attainable outcome.
What a beautiful testament to being very intentional with how you went through a difficult process, and that very early on, your young daughter at the age of 7 or 8, could even have identified this as good, as more peaceful and calm. And we don't often hear good and divorce in the same phrase, so that's impressive. And I also love that you preface this, that you're not promoting divorce, because that's what I say to people too. I publish a magazine, I have a podcast, and doing all these things around divorce, not promoting it, helping people through it. So and you've built this beautiful tool for moms.
Yes. And and it's interesting, and when you say that the term good and divorce, don't go together. I have, over these years since I've published the book, I have people, when I mention that I've written this book, and they look at me when I say a good divorce, and there's skepticism, a good divorce. And then some people say, I know one other couple that I think has a good divorce. And my response to that is, it's so great, one other couple, but wouldn't it be great if most couples, a large majority, maybe not all, because I realize there are, and I should say this, Dina, there are instances where the situations that trigger the divorce are so significant from either a physical or mental abuse standpoint that some of the things I'm going to say may not apply to those very specific situations. But in general, there's many divorces that fall in the category that could be put into a good divorce bucket if people approached it in a different mindset. And at the end of the day, a good divorce is couples putting aside their personal feelings for one another and focusing on what's best for their children. Because when a couple goes through divorce and children involved, the stakes are high. And we owe it to our children that they're not collateral damage because of this process. And I say, even though a couple decides that they no longer want to be married to each other, we made a commitment to our children when we brought them into this world that we bring them up in the healthiest, happiest, safest environment possible. I kind of joke that we cover the plugs, we put bike helmets on them, we feed them organic milk. We do all these things, that are made, meant to make sure that they're okay and they're healthy, but the toxicity that can come from a divorce can have a long-term impact on our children's approach to relationships, their view on marriage, and their overall happiness in life. And I think we have a responsibility as parents to take the co-parenting that's required in a divorce situation and take it very seriously, because it is going to have a huge impact on how your children progress through life from that point that you've gone through that divorce.
Now, we're going to need to unpack this a little, Sarah, because there were questions that I had for you, and I'm so happy that you touched on one of them already. Pardon me, and that's around abuse. Because as I went through your book, it's such a beautiful plan for how you can make this transition a lasting, peaceful, amicable atmosphere within your family, and even your extended family, and even you touch on the future significant others of the other parent. So a few things though I wanted to ask, and we'll get to that, so remind me if I forget, because I'm like into the conversation. I do want to talk a little bit more about step parenting and about grandparenting, which you aren't to yet, but I'm hoping there'll be another book coming out, or something around that. The abuse, much of what you have in the book could be used even in that type of a situation, but how can you apply it? Because so much of what the content that I produce and what's very close to my heart is bringing awareness to those types of situations. And it's just not the same dynamic that you've pictured for us,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yes. Well, what I generally say in those situations is, in the situation where co-parenting is maybe not feasible in the way that I'm laying out in aspects of the book, what you can control as a mom or as a parent in the situation, in the moments that you can define what you want for your children, you can still influence things where the negativity of what happened in the past can hopefully be left in the past and doesn't stay as this cloud that follows you for the future. And that's the piece, because I think, divorce in many ways can be a scarlet letter, relative to the societal perception, and also what you carry for yourself of that failure, in your life. And when there's also trauma that comes with that, it can really stay with you. And what I hope is that individuals that are in those situations get the therapy they need, they get the support they need to be able to process all of that. But then hopefully, in some respects, compartmentalize it. And I know that this is easier said than done, but I do talk about in my book a muscle that I think we all need in life. But we really need it during a divorce. And I joke that I do Pilates and they focus on your getting a strong core and all these things, core muscle. But I think building a strong compartmentalization muscle is one of the most important things we can do, because what that allows us to do is, because emotions can run so high during, leading up to, during, and after divorce, that those emotions and what we expose our children to is something we really have to reflect on, because they're not at an age, many of them, to process the emotions that you might be displaying as their parent, as their mom. And so what I try to share is, in those moments where you are feeling high emotion about whatever the situation, whatever button was pushed, or whatever emotion you're feeling based on what you're reflecting on from the past, think about where your children are relative to seeing you sharing those emotions. And it's not that those emotions shouldn't be expressed. I'm not saying to suppress them. I'm saying think about when they're meant to come out. Because if you can do that, then you are protecting your children in a way that I think is important. And so I say, go on a walk, call a friend, go to a therapist, whatever it is, to go out and express and share those emotions. But when your children are in the room or in the car with you or at the event with you, and that button is pushed or that moment occurs, to really think about, is this the moment to show those emotions? Is this the moment to pull everyone back into the fact that you're divorced, or the fact that this thing happened, or the fact that your ex-spouse isn't the person you thought they were, they're not a good parent, or whatever the label you want to put on that moment, and just think about whether that needs to be shared at that moment. And it takes, by the way, it takes effort to build this muscle that I'm talking about. It's not easy. I do think it's doable. And I think it is so worth it for the sake of our children to do this, because it's a lifelong journey to be, quote unquote, divorced. But I truly don't believe it has to be this negative cloud that literally follows you throughout the course and the path of your life.
Well, that's such a valid point. If we cannot just be reactive, but it does, like you say, and I'm happy that you acknowledged how difficult it can be, because especially, I came from over 30 years of abuse, and my children were adults by the time that I finally left. You're very conditioned to be in that flight or fight or fawn, or, you're on survival mode for so much of it. So you need to be reactive, because that's just a survival mode reaction.
Yes.
But to realize that you're safe now, probably, the most dangerous time is during and after you've left. But as far as having safe space to process it, you can take that time And if your motive and your incentive is these children that are with you, then even if that, like for many women, I've realized that sometimes that's the incentive, the motive to finally leave those situations. But now the healing process that you're describing, where we build that muscle of being able to compartmentalize that, right now, I can set that aside. My children don't need to see this reaction unless they're in imminent danger. That's a different situation, but we're not talking about that type of thing right now. We've now experienced something that we may be very frustrated with what their other parent has done, and it's just not at that moment to completely react to it.
Yeah, yeah, because I think it just brings everyone back. And it's like I say that I think there are two types of mindsets that you can go into a post-divorce phase with. One is you're going to continue to bring up what happened. You're going to continue to focus on the fact that we're divorced and X happened and Y happened and this and that. Or you can look ahead and you can look to the future and you can look to bringing the positives of life that you want for you and your children. Because I think that's the piece. It's like you've made the change, you've made the decision to get a divorce for reasons. Again, I said earlier, generally they're not positive. But then leave that negative trigger where it needs to be and really try to focus on what you can do to pave that more positive path for you and your children. And that's really what my whole intent is when I talk about having a good divorce is how do you take the positive and build on that so that your children can look back and say, yeah, my parents got divorced, but it didn't define everything. And that's hopefully Grace is now 21 and she and I've had many conversations on this topic over the years, but that was my goal is at the end of the day, Grace could look back and be like, yeah, my parents aren't together anymore. But they had a good divorce and I'm good. I'm good, we're good. I have great relationships with both of them. That was my goal. And that was our goal, I should say.
And the other thing that I loved about something that you mentioned and another motive you have is setting Grace up for positive relationships. It doesn't taint that for them,
right,
because they've witnessed horrible things and toxic relationships. And there's that, an undercurrent of, well, you can't really talk to mom about relationships because she's had a horrible experience, and I can't really talk to dad for the same reason. And this is what I've seen modeled. Very tricky. Now, as far as it brought up in my mind so I've been had to be no contact. I could because we weren't co-parenting young children, but we're now grandparents very shortly after we became grandparents, and that whole family dynamic had changed, which you just need to deal with it, right? And I've encouraged my daughter to explore her relationship. It for a time had to be put on hold because of that toxin was turned towards her instead of on me because I was out of the picture. And it took her some time to process things. And now she has found a way that he wasn't not a horrible dad, just the atmosphere, but she wants him as a grandparent, but on her terms. And that has all been a learning process. So trying to understand and accept, find those little positive things and build on those. And I realize I've got plenty of time. The oldest one's 6 before we have to attend anything together. So I have time to prepare my mindset, like how you're describing. What is the positive? I'm not going to keep rehashing. I speak about it so others don't feel alone, to bring awareness, but I'm not stuck in that identity anymore. I'm thinking that's what you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. And I think to your point, I think the time and the space and what you're referring to, it can take, I say that, people can be long processors. You don't have to process overnight. You don't have to process in a year. It's like whatever processing time you need to be able to come to a place where you can live in a healthy dynamic with whatever situation you're in, I think is the goal. And again, there's a spectrum of what that will look like. And to your point, can there be a day when you and your ex-husband are at, a play for your grandchild? And can you be both at the play? Could you be in this, in the same sections, or could you be sitting next to each other? I mean, those are all spectrums of the same, situation. It's just a matter of where are you on that spectrum, or you don't attend at all, right? That's the far end of the spectrum. But thinking about what that is, and that was an example for as we were going through our divorce. I said, Grace played soccer. She, was involved in school events, and I said, when she is at her soccer game, and if she were to score a goal, she should be able to look up and see her dad and I on the same side of the field, ideally standing relatively near each other. So if something good happens, she can look up and see both of her parents applauding for her. She doesn't have to look at one side of the field for one parent and one side of the field for other, or one parent's not there, so right. Those are the types of things. Again, these are these micro moments in a child's life that are really important to reflect on, in terms of what that looks like. And, one of the other moments that we had, Dina, that really stuck with me is about 5 years after our divorce. Grace was in 6th grade, and in her school, the children go to the parent-teacher conference with the parents. And so the three of us go to her parent-teacher conference, and we go in, we meet with her teacher. At the end of this hour of conversation, the teacher stops and she says, "Wait a minute, are you two divorced?"
Okay, I'm sorry to leave you in suspense. We will get right back to Sarah's story about a parent-teacher interview with herself, her ex, and her daughter, and the teacher, and what example that she's sharing by telling us that story. I do want to let you know about online support groups that I host every 2 weeks, and those are really easy to access. It's held over Zoom. They're free. All of them are listed on our events page, divorcemagazinecanada.com/events. Now, those links are going to be in the show notes as well, so really easy to find. You will meet experts. You can ask them questions. You can help solve some of the mysteries and concerns that maybe you have, and they are there to support you. We also have a new channel called Life Changes Channel that's on Public Place Network. The link is in the show notes. And on there, you're going to be able to watch more of these videos. They're also on our YouTube channel. And they're a little easier to find topic specific on the new Life Changes channel. So I encourage you to pop over there and check them out. Let us know what you think. We are trying to find all the ways possible to support you and give you a way to connect with the content and the resources that are out there. Okay, enough suspense. Let's get back to Sarah's story about their parent-teacher conference.
And I said, "Oh, yeah, we've been divorced since Grace was in 1st grade." And she said, "I had no idea." And I looked at her and I said, "It didn't occur to me to come in and say, 'Hi, we're divorced. But can we have our Grace's parent-teacher conference now?'" I said, it didn't occur to me to tell you." She said, "You would be so shocked at how few parents can walk into this office, and the parents that are divorced walk in this office and sit here for an hour with their child and have a conversation about their child's education. It is very, very rare." And she said, "And it really makes me sad." And I said to her, "That makes me really sad too, because what is more important to two parents than how their child is doing in school and hearing that from the teacher?" And by the way, Grace is hearing this entire conversation, and that just made me reflect on those moments that, our children deserve to have both of our parents or both grandparents there. Again, if the situation can allow for it, and it can be a healthy, safe situation. But I just think that they deserve that. They don't deserve to have to. By the way, the teachers also then, in those instances where parents can't be in the same room, have to have 2 parent-teacher conferences, and the kids have to go to 2 parent-teacher conferences. So there's a multiplier effect, that happens in those instances. So I think those are the things. Small example, but the day-to-day real life example of what happens. And I just think that those are the moments we have to reflect on. Think, what are we doing in those instances to show our children that we're there for them, that we love them, that we're supporting them? And it isn't about the divorce. It's about them.
Well, those are the moments that build the memories, that they're the bricks in the wall of, the family dynamic of what they will remember from their childhood. And it won't be that it's well, I can't really mention this because then it's going to cause a competition between my parents, or there's going to be animosity because, well, what, dad said that? Like, I don't agree. Or, there's just so many situations that can come up where if the mindset is there to be combative, any little thing can trigger that type of response.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so mindset is essential, Dina. It's where I talk about it in the book as one of the first topics, because that, and again, the negativity of what brought you to a divorce, the positive intent of what you need to go into with the divorce process of how you want to approach this is really fundamental. And I know that that's not intuitive for many people because divorce and negative are hand in hand. But I think that is one of the fundamental shifts I'm trying to help the broader society see, and anyone that's involved in a divorce or has friends or family members that are going through divorce. How do you support them in a way and be there and acknowledge why it happened, but then really talk about it in a different way and think about it in a different way to help people? Because the reality is we're all going to, similar to cancer, unfortunately, we're all going to know people that are going to go through a divorce, whether it's ourselves, a family member, a friend, and helping them think that there's a different path, I think, is also part of the goal of sharing this concept of a good divorce.
Well, and to your point, Sarah, about thinking about the future, what are you trying to build instead of being stuck in that past? And that's your whole identity, that's your experience. And it's almost like a righteous resentment, because you're like, well, I deserve to feel this angry and I'm going to hang on to this, and it's going to protect me from maybe being in that situation again in the future. And this person's to blame and they're never going to forget that. How does that serve you and your children in the future? And is it important in this moment? Like, will this really matter 5 hours, 5 days? You hear that, 5 weeks, 5 years from now. Can I let this go? Can I move on? Can I move forward? I think that's really very important. And it is something that takes, like you say, it needs exercise, it needs to be built. But if you can do it moment by moment and celebrate little wins, even that you caught yourself thinking that, going, oh, wait a minute, that is a win. That's a first step.
Absolutely. It's about, by the way, it's about taking the high road. And generally it's having to take the high road. And I will say is the high road can be steep. It can be hard. It can look like, oh, do I want to take the high road? But I've said, even though it's not easy, it is so worth it taking the high road in those moments as you talked about. And I've never regretted, when I've had a moment where a button's been pushed to say, no, just take a deep breath, take the high road. And I think that that's always served me well. But I think that the muscle you have to build, you almost have to work out, right? In terms of taking that road, because it is steep, but it is, I think, a fundamental part of that post-divorce journey.
I love the visual you've just given us, because that is very relevant to where we find ourselves sometimes.
Absolutely.
It's like, this is gonna be
you have
hard.
To take a deep breath.
It's this is gonna be a steep one.
Yes.
And they aren't all steep, but some and especially at first will feel steep.
Yes.
Now I want to touch just a bit, and I do want to have you back. I'd like to go through the sections in your book and really kind of dig in and walk through the different stages that you've set in the book. What I really am impressed with, that I love, is how you've structured the book. So you've taken each little step that you experienced, or that some of your friends that have contributed from their experiences, what you will see and what you will probably experience. Oh, there's this, and then this is probably going to come up, and then this and this. And you've broken it out into different sections. You've made it very quick reference. What I love about it too is you can read some phenomenal books that are helpful, but then you're in a situation like, I don't know where to find that in that. Oh, that was so good, but how am I going to find it? The way you have it set out is very quick to pop in, and you've really sectioned it out, titled it, and a person can just like dive right in and, oh yeah, here's that part. Okay, what did Sarah have to say about that one? So I really like that. So we're going to dig back into that. But today, something I didn't notice mentioned, and maybe because when you wrote it, that, and maybe it isn't in your situation, but you've some of you know people who are, is the step parent component, because very commonly that new either your children will have in the other parent's home, there will be significant either half siblings that they're related, or others in that home that are older, younger, same age. You all might be welcoming bonus children into your life. Can you touch on that a bit, please?
Yeah. So it's interesting, to your point, because I didn't, in the early stages of the book, did not have that dynamic to that degree on either side. I didn't really probably focus on it like I could. I think, by the way, there's many books written on the topic of step parentum and all the dynamics that come with it. But what I would say is, I do touch briefly on the book that, thinking about how you approach the relationship with the significant other, what does that look like? How do you approach the relationship with ex-grandparents? Like those, those things, those are, because those are real dynamics of the next phase. And so I think, similar to most of my book, what I say in those topics is really think about the fact that your child is the one that has to adjust to all these new people in their lives. You do to an extent, but it's really your child that's now living across two homes with potentially two new family structures, different dynamics on whether they're sharing a bathroom with someone or they're sharing a bedroom with someone, And so all of that is put yourself in your child's mindset of like, what does that mean to them? What's the dynamic they're having to deal with? And I think that's the focus that we all need to have in those moments when a step, quote unquote, situation is at hand. It's not about you. I know everyone's like, well, I have this opinion. Well, great, good for you. But most importantly is, how is your child feeling about that dynamic or that individual being in their lives? And so I think that's the piece that is important to always keep in mind, and ask yourself that question. Just kind of keep yourself, give yourself your own mental check of how you're being supportive of your child having to be in that, because again, they didn't choose for their parent, whichever parent, to find someone else and to bring someone else and potentially children, into their world in that way. And so they're the ones that you have to think, how can I support them in that moment, or them in that dynamic that they're having to deal with, versus what you're feeling, which we're all going to have emotions about that dynamic as well. But that is not what needs to be front and center.
Right. Or reacted to.
Or reacted to, and in fairness, or sharing your perspective on the individual, or those, again, share it with your friend, share it with your therapist. Sharing that with your child may put your child in a situation where they're then, as they're in those situations, going, well, mom said this about this person or mine. It's like, you know what, they don't need to know what you think about that. It's not, let them form their own opinions about that person, that scenario, because that is their life. They're living in that household or in that dynamic. You aren't. So I don't think it's fair to project onto your child your perspective, when in fairness, it may not be their perspective. They might actually like the person. They might like their children. They may like the dynamic of having that family unit in a different way than you might have in your household. And so I think that's something we have to remind ourselves about, because sometimes we want to shape it for our children, shape that perception. And I fundamentally don't believe that that's our role in those moments, because our children need to be able to shape their own perceptions of the reality of their lives. Because it's now a life, that part of their life is not your life with them. It's their life with their other parent.
That's such a valid point. And it can set them up for a future of this not working out. This person could be there for a very long, become a very permanent member of their extended family. And you've kind of eroded that foundation, or the potential for a strong foundation, if you feel the need to,
I would say overshare.
to overshare. However, I do, and I know this keeps coming back around abuse and that type of thing. But also, if you haven't already made made your feelings or your initial reaction something that you've shared, and you've just stayed neutral, then your child is going to feel safer to talk to you about if there are little concerns that they have, or big concerns or fears or something that's made them uncomfortable, because they aren't going to feel like, well, if I say this, mom's just going to go, see, I told you, and there's going to be this big reaction, and there's all this negative and protective, and mom's going to overreact. We've seen that you have exercised and built that compartmental. You aren't overreacting. You're being taking the higher road, and they then are safe to discuss things and know that you're going to see it with an open mind, from a neutral perspective, with a healthy mindset. You might go scream in the garbage can later.
Right? It could, yeah, it could make you crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
but they need to know they can have that space with you to discuss. And it doesn't have to be, like I say, abuse when I preface that little comment, but it might just be something that they're instinctually feeling uncomfortable about, and whatever that might be, and that they can discuss that with you, and you can talk about it together. And then maybe that's something you take up, and it's a conversation they are wanting to have. You can help facilitate that conversation with their other parent. This is a concern they have, and is this something, like, what's the content around, what was the context of this, that when this happened, are you aware, whatever it might be. And so I think
yeah.
And then if you've done like what you've helped us build, if we follow some of this advice from your book, Sarah, is we have created an atmosphere with, in a relationship with that other parent, that we can enter into those kinds of conversations. It just supports our child again.
Yeah, it is all about that. And I think you're right. I think being as neutral is a great word, because being as neutral as possible allows lots of different avenues of conversation and support to be given. And when you put a stake in the ground, or give a perspective that is going to put you on one side or the other of what your child may or may not be feeling at that point, it does define how much they're going to be open with you. And so I think it's a really important point to reflect on.
Now, this is all well and good if both parents are willing to create this kind of an atmosphere. Now, you've written this for moms, and they may be totally on board, and they really want to do their divorce as a good divorce, like you've described here. Do you have any tips for helping them convince or, get the other parent on board?
Yeah.
And it can work both. I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
It's not always the mom or the dad, but
it can go both ways. I think it starts with, again, at the point of the divorce, and having some conversation about what both of you are willing and able to do, right, in these scenarios, and figuring out where are the places that you can have a common understanding and goal, because it might not be across everything in your child's day-to-day life that you're going to agree on co-parenting well, but are there some things where could you start? Like, is it the sporting events? Is it birthdays? Is it like, what are the moments that you want to be able to support the concept of co-parenting well together? And then can you build on that over the course of time? Because in some instances, you can't even fathom that you could do all of it. Like all the things I put in the book, and just to go back to that, I've written it in those bite-sized pieces, as you mentioned. And I've done it at the bite-sized piece, because you might only be able to take in one piece of that, even with your soon-to-be ex-spouse, and say, I want to think about this topic with you, this one thing. How are we going to do this? And in doing that, you can build, they're building blocks and kind of pavers to a better path. And so it's a matter of figuring out what are the ones that are you're most commonly aligned, or you have the most common alignment of doing the right thing for your child, and use those as the stepping stones, for that. And it's just a matter, and each couple is going to have maybe a different starting point for what that looks like in terms of what's important to you as individuals, as a couple, and as a family dynamic. But I think that's really the best place to start. And then over the course of time, you can build on things over the course of years, to the point where, my ex-husband and I were pretty aligned up front, but there are things that we even did over the course of time that I was like, look, we moved Grace in to her college dorm room together, the two of us, and both there, like lugging the boxes, the bins, and and we went out to dinner that night and celebrated launching her into the world. And if you had told me 14 years ago that we would go to dinner and, just the two of us, I might say, oh, I don't know, dinner. But, and we did that. And it felt really good to do that because we had co-parented her well together and we were proud of getting to that point together.
Well, and I like how you mentioned just pick one maybe to start with. And as you see a win there, and as the parents both witness the child's like, the relief, the sense of calm that it brings to all of you, then that's going to build, like you say,
Absolutely.
and then you'll continue on.
Absolutely. And I think, the interesting thing is we talk about, because there's preparing for the changes I talk about in the book, the first phase, during the change and post the change. But one of the things that I do talk about is that year of firsts, the year after divorce, the first year after divorce is such an important year. And exactly what you're saying, I say to try that thing, try how you approach the birthday, try how you approach, a school event, whatever that moment is. And then you evaluate yourself, and you may even talk to the other parent and say, how did that work? Like, do we want to do it that way again or not? And it's because it's a little bit of trial and error of what's going to work for you in this new dynamic. And you don't know how you're going to feel until you try it. And so I feel like that year first is a bit of, a test and learn phase for both you, for your children, for the family. And then you have the flexibility to say, that worked well. Let's do that again next year. Cool. Or you know what? We're never doing it that way again. And that's okay too. There are those moments where it didn't work. The dynamic didn't work. It was uncomfortable, or whatever the case. The child didn't like the dynamic. So that's the thing you have to kind of reflect on together.
Well, and over time, you'll be able to face those, if you want to call them fails, with a sense of humor and just
Yes.
like, you know what? Okay.
Yeah.
Not again.
Yeah. It was a valiant effort, but
Yeah.
that didn't work for either of us. And so then you don't do it.
Fantastic. It's been such a pleasure to have you here today, Sarah. I will include the link in the show notes for people to be able to get their own copy of your book and get started on their own good divorce. And we are really looking forward to having you back. I know I am. I know my listeners will be. And we're going to dig in a little deeper to some of these specific points that you have, and just hear your stories around them or experiences.
Happy to, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I just hope that your listeners can reflect on what we've talked about and know that, as I mentioned, a good divorce takes effort. It is not necessarily an easy path sometimes, but it is absolutely worth it. And I do fundamentally believe it's an attainable outcome if you approach it with the right mindset and you put your children first every step of the way. And so that's what I wish for everyone as they go on their own respective journeys to get to a happier place.
That's beautiful, Sarah. Thank you. I hope you found that conversation insightful, encouraging, and also a reminder to all of us that what we see isn't always as it appears. People are going through a lot of things in their lives, and we would want that compassion shared to us, and that is something that we can offer to others without judgment. Instead, be curious and reach out, reach in, figure out a way that you can make someone's day a little better, and it might just start with a smile. I thank you very much for spending your time with me here today, and encourage you to please subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media, check out our events. We have lots of ways that we can help you or someone that you love. Share this with a friend if there's someone that you know could benefit from this. And hey, keep smiling that beautiful smile, because the world really does need your sunshine. It means a lot that you spend this time with us and meet our experts and professionals who can help you through whatever life changes you're facing. Please refer to our terms of service available on our website, lifechangesmag.com. The link is in the show notes. Our disclaimer: Divorce Magazine Canada, Life Changes Magazine and channel, and divorce resource groups are intended to educate and provide quality, credible resource information. The contents should not be used as factual until consultation with the appropriate professionals for any guidance.
Divorce Magazine Canada, Life Changes Magazine, and Life Changes Channel, as well as the divorce resource groups, do not constitute endorsements for, nor liability for any claims made in the presenting of this information.